At age 26, Leonardo da Vinci was painting religious commissions for churches in Florence. A few years later, he was designing military weapons no one had seen before. By his 40s, he was sketching helicopters centuries before flight was even possible, and dissecting corpses just to understand how the human shoulder rotates. One life, dozens of worlds. And here's the strange part, he finished very few things. Not because he was lazy, but because his mind never stayed still long enough to settle. Now think about your own life. How many times have you started something, felt consumed by it, then dropped it to chase a completely different obsession? People might call you scattered, unfocused, or indecisive. But what if what you're experiencing isn't chaos, but polymathy? Polymaths aren't just multitaskers or high achievers. They are people whose curiosity refuses to be fenced in, and that can feel like a blessing, or like carrying too many selves inside one's skin. This is where Carl Jung's psychology becomes incredibly relevant. He didn't write directly about polymaths, but he understood what it meant to be psychologically many. To carry within you a scientist, an artist, a philosopher, and a skeptic, all arguing for airtime. Jung called this the individuation process, not becoming someone else, but becoming fully yourself. Being a polymath isn't about collecting accolades or dabbling for show. It's about a brain that refuses to settle. You might jump from calculus to sculpture, from psychology to history, not to impress, but because you feel compelled to understand, to connect, to explore. But this isn't always easy. Society prizes focus. Schools ask you to choose a major early on. Careers reward vertical depth over lateral breadth. If you don't specialize, you're often seen as unreliable or unfocused. And in trying to fit into these narrow molds, you might lose your spark. You become fragmented, not because you're broken, but because you're trying to squeeze too many dimensions into a one-dimensional space. Jung's model of the psyche explains this inner fragmentation. He believed the self isn't just the ego, the part you show to the world, but an entire constellation of potential selves. Some parts of you are visible, others stay hidden, waiting for the right context to emerge. For polymaths, these hidden parts are especially active. They don't wait quietly. They nudge, push, and sometimes pull you in entirely new directions. This causes tension between who you think you are, who others expect you to be, and who you might become. Jung called this tension enantiodromia, where conflicting forces within the psyche compete for balance. For polymaths, it can show up as guilt, anxiety, or the pressure to finish what you start, when deep down, you know that completion isn't always the point. Exploration is. That tension doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're growing. But to grow without burning out, you need more than curiosity. You need rhythm. Polymaths who thrive usually learn how to pace their interests. They rotate them rather than juggling them all at once. They build systems of return, ways to revisit and deepen earlier pursuits instead of abandoning them out of guilt. Still, there's an added layer of modern pressure. In today's world, you're expected to monetize everything. If you're into photography, you should sell prints. If you're coding for fun, someone will ask when your startup launches. This constant push to commercialize creativity can make your passions feel transactional, and social media doesn't help. It rewards narrow identities, easier to market, easier to digest. But your mind might not want to live in one lane. Your thoughts spill over, and the algorithm doesn't know what to do with that. So what do you do? How do you stay true to your polymathic nature in a world that favors clarity over complexity? Jung's answer was individuation, not the feel-good version where you find your passion, but the deeper process of integrating every part of yourself. This means recognizing your contradictions, accepting the unresolved, and learning to navigate your shifting interests without disowning them. But individuation isn't a weekend retreat. It's long, quiet work. It means carving out spaces where you don't have to be efficient or impressive or even coherent. You just have to be present with yourself, with your ideas, with your tension. Jung built a literal tower to do this kind of work. Not to hide from the world, but to listen to himself without interruption. You don't need a tower. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's reading books that don't relate to your job. Maybe it's starting projects that have no audience. The point is, you need spaces where the stakes are internal, not external. This isn't self-indulgence, it's self-maintenance. You also need to stop waiting for permission. The world may never validate your path. You might never have a neat answer to, "What do you do?" And that's okay. Because the real reward of polymathy isn't status, it's synthesis. It's that click you feel when two unrelated ideas suddenly illuminate each other. That spark of insight when art informs your science or philosophy reshapes your approach to business. These moments don't happen despite your multiplicity. They happen because of it. But they require patience and self-trust. Because the path of a polymath isn't linear. It doesn't have milestones others recognize. It's a path you feel your way through by following threads, asking better questions, and letting your ideas mature over time. That's not inefficiency, that's integrity. So instead of asking, "What should I be doing with my life?" maybe ask, "What parts of myself am I still hiding? What connections am I not letting happen?" The point isn't to pick one identity and discard the rest. It's to become the person in whom all your parts can live and speak and collaborate. You're not here to explain yourself. You're here to become yourself. But here's the thing. Integration takes patience. The world doesn't reward people who are in progress. It wants polished outputs, not messy inner processes. Which means you've got to develop a kind of inner loyalty to your own rhythm, especially if your growth doesn't look like everyone else's. So if you're someone who's always jumping between fields, questioning things deeply, or following curiosities that don't seem to go together, don't rush to tie it all up in a bow. Let it simmer. Let it stay unresolved. Your wholeness doesn't need to be efficient. It just needs to be yours. And if this resonated, don't let it end here. Share this with someone else who needs to hear it, someone you know is building something beneath the surface that doesn't look finished yet. Subscribe if you haven't, because this space is for people walking that unconventional path with depth, not just noise. Stay curious, stay complex, and trust that being difficult to define might be the clearest sign you're doing something honest.